The astronaut. Years of training to put it all on the line, to boldly go. Mission control. Years of training to call the shots and keep their partner composed. Both their fates hang by a thread in a matter of seconds. Start the countdown. Houston, Texas was one of America's more exciting and rapidly growing cities in the 1960s. NASA's Manned Spacecraft Center would open in Houston in 1961, and it would be granted a Major League Baseball expansion team in 1962. Originally known as the Colt 45s, as they were affiliated with the Colt Firearm Company, they'd take on the Astros moniker 3 years later when they moved into the Astrodome. It was the first domed sports stadium, aka the eighth wonder of the world, complete with an all-astronaut grounds crew. Houston had a rapidly diversifying economy and a diverse group of players in its dugout, as professional sports were still facing the growing pains of integration 20 years after Jackie Robinson had first trotted out for the Brooklyn Dodgers. One of Houston's first great African-American players was Don Wilson. A hard-throwing right-hander with 2 no-hitters to his name, his career would be cut short by a tragedy in his home that would take both his life and his son's. Questions about that fateful night have lingered in the air somewhere between Interstate 610 and the big and bright stars above ever since. Before we get rolling, if you would, please like and subscribe. Help break down the outfield walls that stand between small ball creators like me and a good audience. I roughly average about an hour spent per minute of YouTube content. It's quite the commitment, so come along for the ride and drop me some feedback. Here we go. Don Wilson was born in Monroe, Louisiana in 1945. His family would pack their bags and move to Compton, California, seeking opportunity a few years later. Don was an avid baseball fan. His idols were Ernie Banks, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron. Surprisingly, Don never pitched until high school at Centennial High. His brother Willie was the team's usual pitcher, but he called Don over in relief one day because his arm was sore. Don got the attention of scout Carl Kuehl during his freshman year at Compton Community College in 1964. Don recalled thinking Kuehl had left disappointed. Frustrated, Don fired a ball as hard as he could into the screen fence behind the batter's box. Well, Kuehl saw it all right and signed him straight out of Compton to the Astros. Sorry, I had to. Kuehl would go on to manage the Expos in 1976. Don Wilson started his brief minor league career with the Cocoa Colts of the Cocoa Rookie League in Florida as a reliever. He transitioned into a starter in 1965 with the Class A Cocoa Astros just down the street. He'd notch a 10-8 record in 181 innings. Don would start the 1966 season in Double-A with the Amarillo Sonics of the Texas League. Here he'd post some very respectable stats and see a surprise promotion to the big league club near the conclusion of the minor league season. On September 29, 1966, Don Wilson made his major league debut against the Cincinnati Reds. He got the win and struck out 7, with the day's biggest accomplishment being leaving Pete Rose 0 for 4. Wilson started the 1967 season with the Astros. He brought along a baseball and a pen that never left his sight, attempting to get post-game autographs from all of the heroes of his youth. On June 18th of that year, with his hero Hammerin' Hank Aaron in town, Don tossed a 10-inning no-hitter, striking out 15 of the 30 batters he faced, with none other than Hank Aaron succumbing as the final out. Needless to say, Don was seen as worthy of his autograph. In a post-game interview, Aaron said, "It's young guys like this that make me want to retire." Meanwhile, Don's teammates showered him in champagne, and Astros owner Roy Hofheinz tore up his rookie contract and rewrote it to include a $1,000 raise. This was the very first no-hitter in the history of the Astrodome. Don wrote some more baseball history in 1969. After Reds pitcher Jim Maloney had no-hit the Astros at Crosley Field the day prior, Wilson came out with a little extra on his fastball, no-hitting the Reds. Back-to-back no-hitters between the same teams has only occurred twice in history. Don told the press that Reds manager Dave Bristol added some motivation, calling him gutless from the dugout multiple times. Don always seemed to show up big against Cincinnati and was very honest about disliking them. In this era, it was alleged that Astros manager Harry Walker would often make racially motivated comments that would land him in shouting matches and near fistfights with his African American players, including Don Wilson. This was by far one of the most diverse rosters of that time, but it's hard to say if this was solely Walker's decision. Probably not. Don would make headlines later in the '69 season because word got out that he and white first baseman Kurt Blefary would share hotel rooms while on road trips. Both Don and Kurt defended their friendship boisterously, and it would cause an uproar with the backlash of insults being felt in nearly every park they'd travel to. Both players would receive hate mail. On the record about the subject, Don said, "It's just hard for them to get it through their heads that we're just two human beings trying to make a living in the same game." Don would put together the best season of his career in 1971, going 16-10 with a 2.45 ERA. He was selected to play in that year's All-Star game at Tiger Stadium in Detroit. Young pitching star J.R. Richard would come into his own alongside Don around this time. His is a story for another day, but just as captivating. Don had a shot at no-hitter number 3 a couple years later against familiar foes, the Reds, in 1974. He had them hitless through 8 innings, but was pulled for a pinch hitter by manager Preston Gomez because they were trailing 2-1 and needed a run. Don was initially upset, disappearing to the clubhouse, but he'd reappear and hold no ill will against Gomez for the decision. Don would make an appearance on ABC's The Superstars as a judge in sporting events filmed in the Astrodome that winter. Little did we know this would be his last public appearance. He would celebrate Christmas with his wife, son, and daughter, but on January 5th, 1975, Don's wife Bernice called a family friend saying something was wrong. Bernice explained that Don was still sleeping out in the garage, and so were her 2 children. Mind you, this is 1 p.m. in the afternoon. The friend urged Bernice to call an ambulance. The paramedics noticed that Bernice's face was swollen and bruised. One paramedic checked out the garage while the other went upstairs. Their daughter Denise was found alive, but in alarming condition. Don and their son Alex were pronounced dead on the scene. Houston police found Wilson's Ford Thunderbird parked in the garage with a strange black stain under the tailpipe, and another curious black stain on the bottom of the garage door. Don Wilson was found legs crossed in the passenger seat, with the ignition in the start position and the gas gauge on E. It had clearly run all night and into the morning. Bernice would be treated medically and immediately questioned, but showed signs of amnesia and could not remember what had happened at all. Autopsies were done on both Don and Alex Wilson. Don's blood alcohol level was .167 and carbon monoxide level was 68%. Alex's carbon monoxide level was 62%. It's considered lethal around 40%. Teammates and others close to Don said they had never been aware of any domestic issues in the family, and all agreed that a suicide seemed totally out of character for Don, with all that he had to live for. Teammate Dave Roberts said Don had everything going for him, he had it all together. It's a mystery why Don would be in the passenger seat if he had pulled the car into the garage. It's a mystery why Bernice had not suffered the effects of carbon monoxide like the rest of the family. She retained an attorney and wouldn't speak without them present. The deaths were officially ruled as accidental on February 5, 1975. Case closed and never seriously revisited. This was before high-profile forensics had taken hold in our culture, obviously. Don's number 40 jersey was retired by the Astros on April 14, 1975. That season, the team unveiled their new sunburst uniforms, each with a black number 40 patch on the sleeve in remembrance of Don Wilson. Where Don's story was bookmarked, he had seen Curt Flood lose his Supreme Court case on free agency. He didn't get to see the labor hero that Curt Flood would become, or how much his well-paid slave speech would resonate with future generations of athletes turned activists. It's my hope that somewhere on a Little League field, there's a great or possibly great-great-nephew of Don's on the mound, and whether he sets his sights on Major League Baseball or the edges of the galaxy, may his talents honor Don Wilson's legacy. A first-generation Houston Astro, he was with us to hear Elton John's Rocket Man and David Bowie's Space Odyssey, but I think he missed the space-enamored 70s song most befitting his plight, which came out in 1976, Saturn by Stevie Wonder. Going back to Saturn where the people smile, don't need cars 'cause we've learned to fly on Saturn. Just to live to us is our natural high. Take it easy.